It's 1:08 on July 11th, 2024. We're back in today for Lake County Schools and LCEA bargaining. Had an agenda as we pick up kind of where we left off yesterday. It's totally up to y'all. I know we kind of hit pause and you guys had one more supplemental proposal. You want to start there to get that out of the way, that's fine. If you want to, wherever you guys want to start, that's fine. And we can go from there.
Proposal, everyone gets the animal speech. You probably say that, so that will be
Thank you.
Okay. Well, they might as well do it.
I can just have two, it's fine, so she can log one if you want to stretch the other ones. You can.
I'll sign the books. That one. Listen to another one back. So. I think. Do we have anybody new? We have a couple new.
Okay,
If you want to go ahead and, she can introduce herself when she does.
okay,
If you want, but we have a couple other ones, and I don't know whether everybody knows.
Okay.
The new one.
all right, we'll roll around the table again. Jess, you want to start off?
Jessica Marshall, admin assistant to Mr. Zamora, the assistant superintendent of HR. Haley Jo Randall, admin assistant to deputy superintendent Chad Farnsworth.
Chad Farnsworth, Deputy Superintendent, just to let everybody know, both Mr. Zamora, Assistant Superintendent, and Mr. Feltner, Assistant Superintendent, have family emergencies, so they couldn't be here today. So they apologize for their absence. And they will be watching the recording following this to provide any additional input moving forward.
And I am Desiree Wisdom. I am a school social worker for Lake County.
Kathy Smith, Lake County Education Association President. LCA, Elizabeth Emery, Vice President.
Jessica Smith, Universal High School Media Specialist.
Patrick Kelly, Leesburg High School. David Lopez, Eustis High School.
South Smith, Board Education Association.
Daniel Sadar, Principal, Eastford Middle School.
Brett Frazier, Principal, Umatilla High School.
Andrew Getsinkin, Principal of Lake Point Academy. Stacia Warner, Tiberias Elementary Principal.
Liz Schlatter, Mount Dora.
Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen of the Lake County School District, today I stand before you not just to request a salary raise for our esteemed social workers, but to highlight the critical investment it represents in both our staff and our students. Our school social workers are the backbone of our educational system, tirelessly supporting students and families through challenges that extend far beyond the classroom. Consider the significant responsibilities we undertake daily, from navigating complex educational laws and policies to addressing issues of attendance, homelessness, and student adjustments. In addition to home visits where we place our own personal safety in jeopardy to ensure the well-being of our students. We are at receiving and processing referrals, conducting assessments for disabilities, and developing tailored intervention programs that cater to the diverse needs of our students. Moreover, social workers serve as essential liaisons between our schools, families, and community agencies. We provide invaluable emotional support during times of crisis, facilitating multidisciplinary team meetings to ensure all students, including those with special needs, receive the support necessary for their academic and personal growth. It's crucial to recognize that the role of a school social worker extends beyond direct service provision. We are lifelong learners, continuously upgrading our skills and knowledge through ongoing education and licensure process. This commitment to professional development not only enhances our ability to serve our students effectively, but also incurs significant costs. These costs include $160 per month for 2 years for supervision, equaling up to $3,840. $260 for the licensure exam, which varies depending on how many times the test is taken, and $67 a month for professional liability, totaling to $804 annually. Therefore, we collectively have come to the consensus that certain changes must be made. And these changes include that any school social worker that holds a license of social work, also known as LCSW or LMSW, will receive an annual of $3,500 supplement. Any school social worker that earns their LCSW or LMSW during the course of the school year will receive a prorated amount based on the effective date of the certification. Any school social worker without an LCSW but with a master's degree or grandfathered bachelor's degree will receive an annual 1,000 supplement. And the above amounts will be prorated for school social workers in their positions for less than the full school year. Having licensed clinical social workers on staff at Lake County Schools is an invaluable and underappreciated asset. These professionals possess an enhanced scope of practice that allows them to both offer group and individual counseling, as well as grief counseling and crisis intervention. Despite our unwavering dedication and the critical nature of our work, social workers are not compensated adequately. Over the 5 years of working as a social worker for Lake County Schools, I have witnessed several of my counterparts leave the county due to accepting social work positions in Orange, Seminole, Marion, and Osceola, I don't know how to pronounce that county. Our current salaries do not reflect the depth of our contributions to our student success and well-being. This is not merely a matter of equitable compensation, but also a strategic investment in retaining our talented social workers and attracting new professionals who share our commitment to educational excellence and equity. A salary raise is a tangible demonstration of our appreciation for our tireless efforts and the expertise we bring to our district. It's an affirmation of our professionalism and the vital role we play in shaping a positive school environment where every student can thrive academically, emotionally, and socially. So therefore, I urge each of you to join me in advocating for our salary raise that reflects the invaluable contributions of our school social workers. Let's stand together in recognizing our dedication, professionalism, and unwavering commitment to the students and families of the Lake County School District. Thank you for your attention and support. Okay. Oh. Someone wait just a minute. Okay,
Thank you,
no problem.
and thank you for sharing.
So basically what I just gave you is
Mhm.
just, a
Our
spreadsheet.
copies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we just.
Well, it's okay, he can keep that. What's coming around is just basically a copy of.
This one back, or,
Oh, here.
okay,
Of surrounding counties and what that county offers in terms of supplement pay for school social workers. So as you can see, Lake County does not offer any supplement pay for school social workers. But we have Collier County, Escambia and Marion, where Collier offers 1,094. And then Escambia County offers $4,895 for supplement for school social workers. And then we have Orange County, which is offering or have given 5,000 for licensed clinical social workers. We have Volusia that has given or offers $2,842 for supplement pay for school social workers. St. Lucie offers $1,300, and then Polk County offers $4,517 for school social workers. And so the average, based off of what I've seen, across all counties, that are offering supplement pays for school social workers, the average offered is around $2,979.
Okay, well, we'll definitely take this data into consideration. I think just at first look, I think the base pay, of what, I think y'all are a little low on what our base pay is, looking at the average. But here nor there, that which probably, it likely puts us a lot closer to what some of these are. I definitely acknowledge we don't have a supplement. But our base pay that's represented on here might be a little low.
Can I just offer very quickly, Marion County does supplement licensed, clinical social workers with 2,500.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
The proposal also does kind of follow what we see with the psychologist and the SLPs, that with those positions, if they have that additional certification, we offer them something. Whether it's the fees with the SLPs or the other acting for the psychologist, but both of those we also offer the supplement. So it seems like we have a theme where with these additional positions, we do offer something if they have the additional certification.
Gotcha. And some of the difference that I'm probably seeing between what I mentioned, base pay to that base pay that you guys have might be based on like a 196 when they're on a 202. I don't know. But we can look at all that. It's here and there, right? We'll figure out and run numbers on it. So, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And thank you for the work you guys do in the district. I know it makes a lot of difference in the lives of kids.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Did y'all think a sign sheet? Everybody doing.
Everybody at the table sign-in sheet, looks like it. For the most part. If not, get it when you get out the door. Where you go.
Did you find it?
Liz said she would recommend whether it
Is this the same as what? went out the board?
I don't, did you get those yesterday?
No, at the board meeting I did.
And then you have.
Yeah, I've got a copy from another night.
All three of them are separate?
I'll just sign it all.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But there's Lindsay.
Okay, so these are the actual.
there's
There's
three
the three of
separate
those,
ones.
there's three separate ones. For the,
Okay,
and I think, so you can have all of those.
Do you need me to make copies?
And then we have, you just don't have the general.
these are all part ones, or these are all the same, right?
You need general.
Oh, elementary, okay.
Yeah.
I'm missing the intervention
The
and.
general.
Do you need that
Okay.
through? You have general?
No.
We'll make your copy of whatever you write on.
It looks like not you, yeah, but-
You know what, I'm gonna get that out a little closer.
So the general one.
Oh, why not? Oh, wait, this is part of your.
No, I got everything I need. Yes, look, I have general, I have elementary, and I have intervention. There's just one page.
Oh, here you go. There's my-
Yeah, I get the one.
Would you like that?
Okay, we're good.
Okay, so I think everybody should have gotten a copy of our collective agreement, top priorities handout, which we did hand out to the school board. I think that was Monday.
Monday, yes.
And then we did give out printouts of our survey reports. So y'all have that, but not everybody in the room has the survey reports.
Okay,
That's just because we're trying to save on colored copies.
I appreciate that.
So I don't want to spend too much time going into this, but I'm gonna try to hit on some highlights just to kind of show like where the language is coming from that we've been presenting. And I do want to first preface this by saying I'm not a data scientist, by any means. I am a high school biology and psychology teacher, and while I love data and science, and in many ways I really look up to Guido and all the amazing things he does with his data. I'm not that, but I tried to do the best that I can to compile the data that we have, and share it with y'all. It did take a lot of time to put this together because there are multiple surveys that we did. I will say there are some missing pieces, for example, comments. You'll see some comments in some of the survey summaries, but not all of them, just because I ran out of time. But I can certainly get all of those comments to you. For example, our general bargaining survey data, there were hundreds of comments. So when I have some more time, I'll try to get those to you. But basically our top priorities, we really care as a bargaining unit about quality of instruction and making sure that everything that we're doing is ensuring that our students are getting the best possible instruction that they're receiving. And that is very much related to the high quality educators that we have in our district, attracting and retaining them. So that's our focus that you'll see in the presentation. Obviously, we know we're still dealing with the 20+ laws that impact salary. And then we know that in 2023, a law was passed that expanded private school vouchers, which will continue to have significant fiscal impacts on K-12 funding for public school budgets. But on average, we now know that Florida teachers are paid 50th in the nation. And then the average instructional salary in Lake County as reported to DOE is 45 out of 67 districts. And that dropped from 36 in 22-23. I did also try to do some research and capture that here in this presentation. Again, I'm not a data scientist, and this is by no means probably proper format for citing research. But some of the research that we did, we found that 78%, and this is nationwide, right, of educators feel that they don't have enough planning time. 85% of districts or teachers report that their jobs are unsustainable. And then we also found some data about the costs, right? So urban districts spend an average of $20,000 a year to onboard each new hire. And then even medium-sized districts, we know this can add up, right, to millions of dollars per year. So that's just some data to cite kind of the costs and the research behind the workload trend that we're seeing. And I think this is true nationwide, right? We're seeing high numbers of turnover. We're seeing high numbers of increased behavior concerns, increased workload concerns. We had a wonderful conversation with Mr. Weeks about technology, right? And it was interesting because he's a little bit older than me, and being a Lake County, Florida kid, I went to public school here and I had FCAT. And he mentioned that FCAT actually started later into the beginning of his career. And that was shocking to me because I don't even know a world without FCAT, right? But apparently at the time when they were coming with these standards and with this concept of FCAT, that wasn't really a thing, right? And so educators have gone from not having these core standards that you have to have in place to, you know, Common Core, to what we're experiencing now, the FSA and the FAST, right? Like all of these changes that are happening so rapidly on top of the increased learning loss and the needs of our students, right? So we're seeing a drastic change just in my lifetime, right? And so I can't imagine someone with the wisdom of Kathy, you know, what they've experienced in the time that they've been in education. So we know those are significant issues and concerns. The other pieces that we have in here about retention. So we did look at the Lake County school retention data. I think I mentioned this a little bit yesterday. We had the 2022-23 data that was released that had a 15.3% turnover rate, which was, I think, high compared to the previous years. But one of my colleagues did mention that the corporate turnover rate is 10%. That's good, right? So at 15.3%, that's about 50% higher than the corporate turnover rate that's considered good. Now for this year, it might be a little bit different. I haven't been able to pull the data because the last data that I saw was from March. That was released on the school website or the district website, and then obviously the website has changed. So it's hard to find things now. But the other piece too that we mentioned yesterday with the retention supplement was that about over 50%, right? 57 last year and then 56% this year, 0 to 3 years in Lake County schools left, right? So we're seeing a high turnover for folks with 3 years or less in the district. And then in the presentation, there's some solutions. In some of the research that we did, we found that retention supplements can really reduce attrition, and that's research that was done in multiple states, including Florida. Teachers that receive additional supports from the schools were less likely to leave. You know, if you have support, if you have great mentoring programs, that can really help. And then salary increases is a big one as well. For our surveys, we had, you know, really over 1,000 educators shared just on survey responses alone, but then throughout the year, we're visiting schools, we're constantly documenting the conversations that we're having. And then we're constantly getting emails, phone calls, texts, you name it, of feedback from people like, hey, this is happening, this is happening. And so we're using all of that to drive the proposals at the table. On the next page, you'll see just from the general survey, so we're just using one data set. 89% of the responses mentioning workload related issues, so that's planning, intervention, support. 72% of the responses mentioned salary and pay concerns, so compensation. And then over 50% of the responses mentioned student behavior, discipline, and safety. And then we mentioned yesterday, 60% said retention and recruitment is the top issue on the Lake County School Strategic Plan. And then we did a separate member only survey because we want to make sure our members are dues paying members, right? So they're driving the final priorities that are being set at the table. And again, very similar, right? So you're seeing fair compensation, safe and healthy working conditions, work-life balance, and educator voice. So we kind of come up with these key priorities in our compensation plan. We want to make sure we recognize experience. And then for Article 10, teaching conditions, which we had a really long presentation, right? And then hopefully ours will be shorter today, but we did bring counters for 10 and 11 that address our priorities. So our first priority is student behavior and discipline. Second priority, teacher plan days and teacher work days. Third priority is workload expectations outside of student time. And then for workday, which is Article 11, we have individual planning time and PLCs is the first priority. Second priority is leave time. So we did have that leave subcommittee and we're continuing to work on leave time. And then educator voice and decisions. So really having those joint leadership committees and teacher advisory committees and things like that. And then I did link digitally the survey summaries. So Mr. Farnsworth, you have that in your email. So you can click these and look at them. And they're live Google documents because we're using Google as a district, right? And I got to be able to incorporate that in the work that I'm doing now. And so as I get the comments and get them updated and uploaded, you'll be able to see that live. The last two slides are capturing some of those comments from the general survey, which again had hundreds and hundreds of responses. I just try to pull out just very quickly ones that I think related to a broad spectrum of the different things that we've been talking about. So you'll see comments there about behavior, comments about support, class size, comments about pay, right? Compensation, supplements, things like that, experience pay. So those are just a very quick overview of some of the comments that we got in the surveys. So those are just our kind of a quick overview of our surveys and our top priorities. And then Mr. Farnsworth, you have the actual printouts of the pie graphs. The general survey copy is very similar to what was in the presentation. There's not a lot different there, but you can at least see who responded to the survey, what level, and you can see it's a pretty good mix of the level, including district staff, multiple level folks, teaching and non-load bearing folks, and years in the district. So you can see kind of who responded to those surveys. And then the intervention and workload survey, I'll be honest with y'all, we're really struggling trying to figure out this intervention piece. I don't know when intervention was first implemented. I want to say it was like 2020. Because when I was in the classroom, we had power hour, and then it switched over to this intervention piece. And then when I came out of the classroom, right, kind of in between COVID, in the middle of COVID, we had continued to do intervention, and we were hearing more and more and more concerns about intervention. And so we've been trying to capture what's really happening. We did data in 2021, like a really robust survey in 2021, and that's actually stapled to this as well. And we sent that survey back out again and said, hey, based off the survey we did in 2021, how are you now feeling about intervention? So we used that to kind of have a shorter survey this time around and to see if people's views of intervention have changed, especially after we had the teacher advisory committees on intervention. And because it's just been so difficult to pin down what's happening on every single campus. It's so different. But that's what the purpose of the 2024 intervention workload survey. The first couple of questions talk about meeting time. Because again, we're trying to capture workload. So lots of folks are talking about having to prep for meetings. So you'll see about 55.8% saying that it's anywhere from 31 minutes to 3 hours of prep time for meetings. We also captured, workload outside of contract time. We know teachers are working outside of contract time, right? Like that happens whether you expect them to or not, right? Because they want to do the best job they possibly can for their students, and we have many overachievers in this district. But you can see by that data, anywhere from 31 minutes to 3 hours is 83.7% of the respondents working over contract time. We also wanted to capture about common planning meetings, PLCs and PLTs, because we were getting a lot of complaints about who's driving those meetings. In our proposal yesterday, both sides agreed to self-driven, protected individual planning time. We know the value of PLCs and how important they are. But we are seeing some areas where there are concerns about who's driving those PLC times. And so that's what was captured here. Because you can see the majority of the responses said there's a combination of the teacher, the department lead, the academic coach, administration, running the PLC meetings. So I think there needs to be some more work done there about PLCs. I think we've recognized that that's an area of continuing improvement about who's driving the PLCs and those conversations. And we know that instructional leaders, administration, academic coaches are a part of that process, but are teachers being able to lead those conversations and facilitate the meetings, and administration there to support, or is it vice versa? So that was kind of the question we were trying to get there. And then the fifth question is about the intervention survey from 2021. So have things improved? Is it the same? Has it gotten worse? And basically from my calculation, you're looking at, almost 68% are saying either it's no different than 2021 or it's gotten worse. So I think the intervention piece is still an area you really gotta figure out what's going on there. And then question 6 asks, are you aware that we even had a teacher advisory committee about intervention? Have you seen the intervention guidelines that came out of those committees? And 61.5% that responded said they were not aware of the intervention tag. and they have not seen the documents before. So I think what that tells us is we've got to do a better job of communicating, look, we have these teacher advisory committees, and there are things that are coming out of those committees to be able to address some of these concerns. And I'm sure you all know communication is an ongoing challenge for everything we do, right? But figuring out how can we better communicate that we're having these advisory committees and that they're a method for educators to have input in their working conditions and what's going on in our schools. And then we also were trying to hone in on how can we make intervention more effective? And so we asked 2 questions. We said, what is the single biggest change that would make intervention more effective? And what's the second biggest change that would make intervention more effective? We asked this on this survey as well as in 2021. And it was interesting because the responses changed. In 2021, the majority of folks said more pay for the additional workload of intervention. This time around, it's a small majority, right? But this time around, folks said that reduction in class size or more staff to help doing the intervention block period would be more of a priority than more compensation. And then you can see the second biggest change is kind of really just split. So it's hard to extrapolate like what one thing could we do to really make a change? But it seems that allowing for intervention to have more of an impact with smaller groups seems to be the lead thing from this year. And then you can see on the previous or the next set of pages, 2021. And that report, which gets into more detail about how often is it happening, so you can see. Based off the survey responses, is it happening 4 times a week? Is it happening 3 times a week? Like I was saying, we're really trying to figure out what is actually happening at the schools. There also seems to be a range of number of minutes of the intervention block. There's also a range in the number of students. But it looked like about 65% said they have 11 to 25 students during that intervention time. And then we talked a little bit about tracking attendance, discipline. If you're having to create additional materials for the intervention time. I think the second to last pie graph though is kind of significant because it's saying, do you believe that intervention is effective as it's intended in your work site currently with the parameters in place? And so in 2021, folks said 21, 72% said no. So I think that tells us that the majority of folks that are responding to these surveys don't think intervention is effective as is in 2021. And then when we ask them again this year, they're saying that there basically is no change or it's gotten worse. So again, I think it shows why we need to look at this issue a little bit deeper and maybe continue to have those teacher advisory committees and things like that.
So of the 191 responses,
Yes.
so these were sent to all teachers?
So when we did this survey in 2021, just like we did now, we sent them out to everybody as much as we could. However, I'm giving the caveat of we have had restrictions on what we can send out, right? So in our bargaining unit contract, and we often will try to ask permission to send some of these out, and we're sometimes limited on whether or not we can send them out district wide.
Mhm.
So in the past, when we've been given those restrictions, we will send them to our reps and ask our reps to send them out to get the info.
So I want to address that too, because that's the same thing. Anything that goes out from you guys, that's not within the lines of the contract, it needs to come through the district office. Because it did go out through your building reps. And I, you know me, I'm not gonna get too hung up. And usually anything you guys send me, as long as it doesn't have a direct link to sign up to the union now, I'm pretty good about sending that up. So future expectation, I expect y'all to abide by contract
Right.
and send this through us so we can get it out. That being said, it's cool information, a lot here. So we'll take some time to digest it. Another question I had was in what you collected, is there any way that you have it broken out, say the 265 responses for intervention by grade level or by
We have
school
work sites, so I
subset?
can tell you that we have data for every single
Okay.
work site. Every
Alright.
single work site responded to our surveys, including district locations like student services,
Okay.
ESE, things like that.
Cause I think that will be valuable to us if we know what it looks like for elementary according to these responses, what it looks like by middle and now K-8 and also high, cause a lot of this, it looks different for each site, right? And I can tell you that it's just like with the PLCs, intervention is kind of the same way, that there's a reason I think you see a lot of variety in there and a lot of slices on the pie, right? So the variety of responses is probably because each school is probably in a different spot on their path, right? So I think we had a lot of innovation towards how we adjust our instructional practices come in at one of the roughest times probably in the history of public education. So I think I'm excited because I don't see this as all negative data, right? And you know, I'm sure we could send out surveys and you have people that say it's the greatest thing ever, and you have some that say get rid of it completely. That's how you could change it. But at the end of the day, there's people in here that it sounds to me, if it's done right, it could have some impact pretty much with anything we do with kids, right? And so, I mean, that's a combination of buy-in and fidelity and resources and time to do it right. And sometimes making sure work's done instead of just spending so much time on some more tedious parts of it. So I'm sure Ms. Felton's gonna be excited to look through all of this also, right? Because we get our side of it, but we also need you guys' side of it, and you got a couple different layers there, right? So, because it's important, we want to know, of course, we want to know what all 3,000 teachers are thinking about things, but we're interested in what you guys subgroup is interested in also, because they drive communication on our campuses every day too. So, good stuff. And I appreciate the effort put in. So we'll take a look at it, because I know that's where the work is going to be this year on really getting our footing, honing our direction, and continue to charge forward with, you know, just improving instruction for the kids. At the end of the day, that's the only goal we're looking to do. And it's kind of like what you were saying, what you said, you know, it was a variety of people leading those groups. I think some groups have, even within the school, you see a lot of variety. You might have a 5th grade team that's, man, hard charging. You got a department head that's got it under control, or a grade level leader, and they don't even have to step in the building except for to check in every once in a while. And then you got some where we might have, heck, a 2nd grade team with all new teachers that have barely seen a classroom before. So I think that's where a lot of that comes in. I mean, I think the end goal, and what I know these guys want, and what Mr. Feltner wants, is all that's running smooth, and they're just poking in to provide support and love and move on about their business, so they can go on and move to the safety things and pay attention to all the things that are going on outside of that. So we'll definitely convey all of this.
And I do want to share too, like looking at this data, I did see some positive changes, right? Like the original group in 2021, they said, you know, get rid of it, eliminate it entirely. That number shrunk in 2024. So I think we're seeing people start to understand the value of the intervention block, but I think, like, you're right. We want to do it with fidelity, and we want to do it where it really has a positive impact on students and student outcomes. And I think we're struggling with that right now to see what that looks like. And then I think that at least for me personally, I like to be data driven and solutions focused. And so I like having this data. And so, like you were saying, there's some valuable data here. If we can even work together to create surveys that we can send out district wide, because I'll tell you right now, Kathy and I, it is not on our intent to ever break contract with any contract. And if we knew that a rep was doing that and were told, we would have addressed it immediately. So I can tell you, we have never told our reps to send this out through school email, unless it's related to something that affects the entire bargaining unit.
Gotcha.
So when it's a bargaining survey, right, we want to know data from all 3,000 teachers, not just our cohort of members, right? So if we can work together to create some surveys, then maybe we could send out district wide so everyone has an opportunity to respond. That would be amazing. So I would love to continue to work on doing some of that.
I think that's important, and I think it's definitely a collaborative effort that we can put forward, right? Because I think where with you guys being attached to it, there'll be some consideration of, okay, well, I trust to do this. And then with us being involved in it also, I think there's folks that are sometimes more responsive to us, right? So we can look at what we need to do for that, because that's all we need. We need accurate data, right? Because we know there's skews in all of this, and we have to take that into account. So, and it's hard because it's kind of like on the teacher retention data, the chunk that drives me nuts. Why'd you leave? Personal reasons. Oh my God, defining personal reasons. You can design exit surveys. We've even reached out to them personally after they were disconnected from us and said, hey, now you're gone. You got nothing to worry about. Tell us why. And they're like, I ain't got time for that. I've moved on in my life. So it's like you always got kind of these categories that are going to be a little bit unknown. And I feel like in some of this data, the unknown piece are the people that they're not going to do it at all. And does that mean, you're going to perhaps say, well, they're so frustrated, they're not going to answer it. And then if I'm in an actual position, I'm going to say they're so happy, they just don't even bother, right? So who knows, right? But I do think we can put our heads together. I'm not a statistician either, and we have our own strengths, but we do have guys and ladies that are strong in these areas that we can maximize and get some good input from. So I'm looking forward to it. I want to go ahead and get my other gripe out of the way. That way I can be done griping and get back in my normal skin. Monday. We always appreciate when you guys come and voice yourselves and take your 3 minutes at the podium and do your thing. In more contentious negotiations, this is teetering on the line, I feel like, especially knowing we have 2 bargaining sessions this week. My job is to keep everybody out of trouble, including my board members, my administrators, and even us working together. I get it. There's not a proposal inside of this, but there's some things that are edging up to close to what a lean would be towards a proposal. So what I want to convey to you guys is that in this room, if you ever ask me, Chad, we want to make sure that this makes it in front of board members in executive session. I will never get offended by that. And I will give you an affirmative, yes, I will put this in front of board members at an executive session. Okay. So I just want to make sure that we maintain the same level of professionalism and respect for the work that's done in this room as we always have. So I get it. There's time crunches. There's things you guys want to get out there. You make commitments to make sure it's conveyed and relayed. Let's make sure that goes on. I know there's things like, I don't expect you to call me every time somebody's coming to a board meeting, right? But it's just that this has a lot to do with bargaining. And if I show up with similar things in an auditorium full of teachers from across the district, y'all might be wondering, is this guy direct dealing? What's going on here? This appears to possibly be some type of unfair labor practice. So I would just say, let's be mindful as we approach these, okay? And that's my only other gripe.
Would you clarify what in the presentation would be borderline or a problem?
Well, I'm just telling you that, there's things in here that I'm not going to get into that. I think common sense can tell you that you're showing up a day or 2 before some major league bargaining sessions. And even if it's just professional respect, I would expect that courtesy, and I would give the same to you guys. And I'm not saying that you guys crossed the line with this document, handing out to board members, but it's not in the spirit of how we've done business in the past. And I don't mind. I would have been more than happy to give this to board members and have them read it and understand it and see it, because they have to make important decisions coming up. But I just want you to know that if you do have things, I will take that to them. The timing just was interesting. So that's my only gripe. And I'm not saying we might go to war over it and be upset over it and nothing would wind up happening. But in districts that might have more contentious relationships than we do traditionally, or somebody that, I would say I don't bruise easy. I don't get offended. I don't hold grudges. I'm not that tight. I don't have an ego. So you don't run into this. But in other areas, you might have some attorneys or different people that think differently about when some of this stuff comes, especially so close to a bargaining session and I mean, if I'm an intelligent board member, I can read through lines and kind of predict where the proposals are heading coming into this. So that's all I'm saying. So I'm done with that.
Well, I'll certainly have some conversations with our bargaining specialist folks.
Okay.
It's gonna take-
And I'm sure they'll say you're perfectly legal, you're perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But I will tell you that we've always stayed within lines and never really come close to crossing any lines. And anytime when things in the past, it was a little more contentious when they're not there. I feel like we've charted a brand new path and we've made a lot of progress on that path. So perhaps the FEA way of doing things hasn't always been the way that works best for us. So I would just say both sides. I'll be mindful of that, and I just ask that you guys are too.
All right, so the next item then would be Article 10 and 11 are counter proposals. Wait. Go around, I don't know if I'm ready. Uh-oh. Skips to. We're missing.
No. Elizabeth, do you need to send something to me and I can print it for you? Absolutely.
This, I'm glad you caught that.
When I started looking, I'm like, wait a minute, what is it? Skips from 13.
The way it copied it.
The way it copied it,
skipped pages.
it skipped pages.
So they're gonna be,
Send it to Jessica Marshall so she can have it for hers.
What about your other you want to double check your other documents and, okay.
is it Marshall J at, like,
Yes, I am.
No, 11 is fine.
11 is fine, so just
I
10.
believe so. Cause 11 is shorter, right? So it's like 3 pages.
Haley, are you able to print in, or Jessica, are you able to print in color?
Yes.
Or no, something's wrong here too.
You guys want to take a 5-minute break while we reorganize that we're not just trying to fill there? Okay. Is
Yeah.
1:56 on 7/11/24, taking a 10-minute break. Okay, we're back from break. It's 2:16 on 7/11/2024.
That's the one. This is the other one.
Wanna wait?
Yeah, let's wait on it.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for moving these copies. Like Kathy said, it was a very quick turnaround for us. We were literally working to the last minute before we got here to be able to have these counters ready for today. And stayed late into the night to make sure that we can be ready to present this today. So thank y'all for making sure that we could get this presented. It should be going around for Article 10. So the top right, we try to put a key.
Okay.
so that the green is agreed upon language, so
Okay.
you have already declared that y'all agree the language that we initially proposed, so we
Okay.
just highlight that green, so we know
Perfect.
we're both on the same page with that. The strike through is any new strike throughs, and then the bold and underlines any new proposed
Okay.
language. So myself, Kathy and Patrick can probably try to help each other present this, because like I said, we scrambled and some of us were there for part of it, some of us were there for the other part of getting this language done. The Article 10, Section 2, we originally proposed initial language about copy machines. I think today's a great example of the copy machine issue, like it never goes away. Right?
Yeah,
But we are not countering on that currently. I'll just share with y'all, like, someone recently posted on our Facebook group about copiers and it got over 50 comments in 36 hours, right?
Okay.
So this is a hot button issue. And while we're not, countering this language today, we believe that access to copiers and printers is like kind of a basic working condition.
it's noted. We'll look into it.
Yeah, so we definitely want to keep our eye on that and make
Okay.
sure that everyone has access to the copy machine and they can do the copies that they need to when they have time and capacity.
Okay.
And I will add to that a specific example. Was given to me that all of a sudden, and the teachers were told about it, that all of a sudden the copy machine disappeared from the workroom. And nobody knows where it went, which then makes it more difficult for a teacher because that is the workroom. And where's the copier?
Okay.
So I think on our end, we're gonna continue to work with our building reps and
Okay.
try to identify specific concerns and bring them to either district leadership meetings or joint leadership to
Perfect.
make sure we address those issues, and if necessary, we can bring language back in the future.
Okay.
I think the next one's Article 10, Section 5. So there's agreed upon language there, in the green,
Backing up to section 5,
yes.
is that the counter is to leave in the strike?
Yes.
that
so
you had before?
Is to leave in the strike. We had a long, robust conversation about this in our, committee meeting after to be the counter.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest issue is that we have this contract language currently, which is saying that, educators should not be using their email or communication devices during, time with students, but often they're being expected to check their email or answer the phone. And asked to basically violate this contract language that's in place, on a regular basis. People are getting on the intercom and saying, check your email, and it's
Mhm.
not even emergency related. So I think for us, the biggest concern is, and another example, guidance counselors in a room with a student wants to call the parent, right?
Yeah.
They're with the student, they're still supervising a student, but it's within their duty and what they're doing with the student to answer the phone and talk to the parent, right? So I think we have to figure out a way, how can we make this language make sense to what's actually happening in our schools? And so that's why we originally proposed to strike that language.
Gotcha.
So that's where I was coming.
And I will also add, there was a discussion this morning that we had that in the fact of maybe we could rewrite a little bit of this in this first portion, because some of it kind of saying the same thing in a sense. And also in the fact of putting it more towards the personal technology. like
And that's why I just put personal use and,
Yeah,
and,
like meaning your personal technology, your personal
Yeah.
phone, your personal laptop, your
I was saying
personal,
the personal use. 'Cause
you know,
I mean,
personal
I took
use.
email on phone and on the back of the classroom.
well, but I think checking your email on your phone, your work email, I don't have a problem with that, right? I mean, and it's, on a lot of campuses, it's, even the teachers prefer method of communication with their administrator. And I think the main thing is, I think we can all acknowledge that we know just about everybody's addicted in some way to the scroll, right? So I think, I agree. I think we can easily come to terms on something that says, look, we're not gonna be using it for personal uses, but device can be used for school-related things, right? Okay. Okay, back to section 10.
Okay, section or article
or-
10. Section 8.
8. Okay,
So we had, I think, initially proposed a lot more language there. We decided to not counter with any of that language back. But we did want to recognize that the number of meetings, and after contract duties as well as when they occur, are a concern that was expressed on our survey. So we're gonna continue to monitor and address those concerns as needed, but we wanted to reference the new language in Article 11, Section 2(1)A,
okay,
which just talks about conferences outside of contract hours. And it was existing language, we just modified it slightly, and that was agreed upon language.
okay.
We good with that one?
I don't have any questions.
So Article 10, Section 11. We agreed upon adding the word and supplements.
Okay,
I think we also had a bunch of other language there too, that we
Yes.
are not countering, so we're not bringing that back.
okay,
But we have received lots of concerns about teaching assignments and supplements, so again, we'll continue to monitor that, and if it remains an issue, we'll bring it back.
and from an HR standpoint, we'll continue to have people, we'll raise awareness on letting people know as early as possible. Okay,
Section, 10. I'm looking at my notes here to make sure I didn't miss something.
I think we're on, Article 10, Section 12.
Okay, yes, okay, because we agreed upon section 10 there. So section 12. Oh, I see it, okay. It's out of order, I'm sorry, on my notes. So Article 10, Section 12 on teacher planning days. We had multiple language there as well. Again, we decided not to counter with all of that language. But we did bring up, so one of the reasons why we had suggested changing the title and then including like an A, B, and C about the pre-planning or teacher workdays, because there seems to be confusion about this language, whether or not it's addressing pre-planning or teacher workdays or both. And currently, there's no language specifying pre-planning, workdays, or post-planning, so that's why we had initially proposed that language. We also have had many reports of educators not receiving enough classroom self-directed time during pre-planning to work on their classrooms. And we recognize that there are lots of meetings administrators need to do, they're required to do. Especially at the start of the school year, you need to have some really important conversations with folks. But we want to make sure that we are trying to do everything we can to give teachers time, self-directed time in their classroom, because it was a priority in our survey data. And so instead of proposing that language back here, we want to address it in the Article 11 under the joint leadership committees. So
Okay.
you'll see that when we look at Article 11.
Okay,
But the language that we did keep here, just that one sentence, is just because one of the most rapidly increasing areas of a priority for employees is work flexibility. And I'm sure you're aware of that happened kind of since COVID. Educators in general rarely have opportunities to have a flexible work schedule, right? Because you're constantly supervising students and interacting with students. But we know that there are several districts that have recognized the need of the flexibility piece in order to be competitive with other districts as well as with industry that are, often getting our educators out of the classroom. By allowing educators to have the opportunity to work remotely during teacher work days when there are no scheduled meetings or student supervision duties. And we know that that's kind of happening informally already across the district, right? Often administrators will say, today, don't worry about coming in on this teacher workday as long as you have XYZ done, right? Or they're saying, don't come in as a result of you having a duty or covering classes or whatever the case may be. So we know it's happening, that administrators are giving folks release time to work remotely. But it's kind of sporadic and where, what locations, what level. We know that often we're seeing secondaries getting that opportunity is not as much elementary. So we want to try to create a way to give educators some level of self-directed time and flexibility when it's possible to submit their grades or do what they need to do virtually instead of having to be in the building. Again, because that's a high priority identified in the survey data.
I think a lot of it, there's a few moving parts there, right? I think we've got some schools that can do that. I mean, because we've done some surveying of our administrators on how they're handling Wednesdays, how they're handling work days, how they're handling different things. And I do see where a lot of times they're earning by going above and beyond, covering for classes, they're earning some type of token to be able to take those work days, right? So I think they're rewarding the folks that are able to do that. Also, you know, we've heard since the beginning of time, I earn all this comp time, I don't have any time to use it. So, I mean, that even lessens that. And I get it, if comp time is an artifact of the past at this point, then maybe we need to look at it through a new lens. But then I will be interested to see what elementary does and dive a little deeper into that, because I do think it's a little easier to pull some of that off on the secondary level. But at the end of the day, I got to think through a checks and balances, right? Because I can imagine, you know, all it takes is some few concerned citizens, and, you know, I've got people cruising on the boat on Facebook on the teacher workday, right? So we also have a responsibility to be a good steward of the tax dollar. So need to think a little bit about that, right? And how we organize that, because it's easy for me if they call and I say, look, you know, I get it that you see this, but here's what this person did above and beyond. That's easy to defend, right? So we need to think through that a little bit. I appreciate
And we can give you,
proposal.
the language from other districts too.
Okay,
if you want
yeah,
to
that would be
use
helpful if you could show me kind of where it's happening, and then I can get feedback from some of my counterparts.
Go in the right order and all of this. Okay. Oh. So the next one is Article 10, Section 13. So we originally proposed language here. About photos or videos being taken in the classroom. We're not countering that language as of right now. But we have received concerns about photos and videos being taken. And we just want to make sure that we continue to work together to make sure that folks are being asked, regardless of who's taking the photos in the classroom. Just make sure that they're being communicated with and asked, and we'll continue to monitor that issue and bring it forward.
Sid said he'd stop doing
And I will say, it's kind of like the same idea with, and you mentioned it yesterday with the Facebook. I mean, we know that things are getting out there so much now. And I mean, it's the same thing with the students. If the student has, that the parent doesn't want that photograph, well, sometimes teachers don't want to be out there either. So it would be the same type of situation.
No problem. And right off the bat, we already talked about yesterday, if we got a meeting that, some type of availability to opt out and some disclaiming statements at the beginning of the year and things of that nature. And it's never gonna be perfect, right? And we all know we can get our picture snapped in Publix and not much we can do about it. And then you get into, reasonable expectations of privacy, and we're a two-party state, all these different things. So we just want to respect people. So we'll help you with that. No problem.
So the next one I think is Article 10, Section 16. We had some language here, but we are not countering with that language currently. We're gonna, again, continue to monitor the concerns here about finalizing grades before the marking period, and we did get a range of those from different levels. And then also Kathy had mentioned when we first brought the proposal forward about redos. Redos have recently become a concern, and we know, the workload's a concern, and also the impact on school system and students. And we know, school board member Stephanie Luke mentioned it during a school board workshop, so we know this is an area that we need to continue to talk about, so we're hoping that we'll continue to have some discussions about the concerns of the reading policies. Maybe with our teacher advisory committees, trying to reinstate those and maybe talk about it there. But that's definitely something I want to continue to talk about with that.
Gotcha.
Section 18, that's the agreed upon language.
Okay.
Reading. And then section 19. So I think we both sides agreed that there was an issue here in trying to look at this issue. We tried to come back with something so that, you know, we recognize that this is a continued conversation to try to look at this, whatever it may look like. This was a potential solution, to section 19, for the substitute, and then we added the language in class splitting. Because we felt like with the heading of just substitute, it wasn't clear what this section was addressing. So we added that language, and then we added compensated at hourly rate for the release time, because I think the initial language we had said like you would be paid for an hour. I don't know, Kathy, if you have that language in front of you, but we were trying to come to a compromise position here so that they would get some compensation. Because again, this was a big issue on our surveys, especially our elementary, because this is really for elementary.
Yeah.
Mainly elementary.
Yep.
And they are splitting classes a lot, and when they split, they're saying like 71% are saying it's a moderate to a significant impact when they split. And when they're splitting, they're typically splitting students for the entire day. It's not for like an hour or two. So we want to recognize the significant impact that is, especially if it's last minute. You got to figure out a way to adjust your lesson for additional students. And so that's where this language is.
Okay,
So it's not changing any of the numbers, it's just changing it from the release time to the.
I got you. Okay.
I did want to mention something about that really quick before
Yep.
we move on. One of the piece that came out in the survey data is I think that was important, and I don't know how we address this, but something to think about when folks are on maternity leave. Maybe this is that additional student language, the MOU that we had worked on in the past. Maybe that's where it's addressed, but if folks are on maternity leave or there's a shortage and they're taking on kids for like a semester or 9 weeks.
Yeah.
So I know that MOU is not currently in place, but we might need to look at that.
Or maybe there could just be a total, like a kind of like a supplement. You're gonna get X amount of money. You know, necessarily, because like you said, this would be a lot of money for someone to receive.
The 1
because they-
hour.
because,
initial.
you know, the initial thing. But for example, if they're gonna do it for a 9 weeks, okay, let's take into account that 9 weeks. How many hours that is, and then maybe they could come up with something, I don't know, $500 supplement, I don't know, something in there. That they would say, okay, here's a little bit of compensation for you for doing this extra work we have because you're having these extra students.
I think that's, one thing I've always wanted to do is have some innovative ways to let people know we're a family friendly district, right? And that, I mean, that is tough because we don't. Maternity leave is an issue from a personnel standpoint as far as the burden of their colleagues taking it on. So I like that idea. So
Well, and like you
appreciate it.
said, you guys have always said, well, it's better on the students because then they get a teacher that knows the standards and knows the things, and that's wonderful, but yet it's a lot more burden than on the teacher.
okay.
And I'm gonna say 20, were you still, I mean, is 20 okay with, isn't this where you were talking about the removal of?
Yeah,
Was this something that you were still?
When we come back with this, we'll
Okay,
include that
okay.
in there.
All right.
Yeah.
24.
Is the next one, yeah.
So section 24. There was some conversation about some confusion yesterday of what a teacher aide was, so we wanted to try to clarify that here, so we added paraprofessional instead of teacher aide.
Mhm.
To clarify that, these individuals are employees, staff, teachers, assistants.
Makes sense. Okay.
And that is actually the verbiage that you state statute is paraprofessional.
Yeah, I know we use teacher assistant, but we understand in,
But, correct,
in our systems inside Skyward, yeah.
Correct.
sure.
and so that was just
No, that's fine.
doing that.
And I think the last piece here was Article 10, Section 33,
Yeah,
the workplace safety committee. So did you get clarification then on? the-
no, I haven't. I've still got to get response from risk management,
Okay.
so.
So one of our committee members did bring to our attention that they believe that this is state law.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
it is. But I mean, it's even quoted in the,
yeah, it's. quoted
Yeah.
on there.
we just need to make sure that none of that's how far, because statutory language changes too, right? Make sure that hasn't changed a whole lot and what we need to do to jumpstart to make sure we're in compliance, right?
And just to clarify also that we never did put, is that last paragraph supposed to be just with C or is that supposed to be AD?
No, I think it's a separate paragraph.
I mean, I'm just trying to,
I think it was a separate underneath, because whenever I was scrolling through it the other day, I kind of thought the same thing.
We can always reorganize.
Yeah, it's not a big
Yeah,
deal.
we
We
can
can figure it out.
yeah.
You
It
want
was-
ID when we
I
do
mean, I
it
don't know
this
if
year?
it's- I'm just asking because right now it looks kind of like,
It's hanging.
where is it supposed to go?
Because it might be adjusted.
Okay.
anyway.
Yeah, we'll check it out.
So it's kind of just like hanging there right now.
So we did have some language on that section, but we're not countering with it. We will add just one word to kind of address what we were trying to do there in Article 11.
Okay.
So that should be all of Article. I think we've gotten around. So again, the same key, right? So we're using the green as agreed upon language. So in Article 11, Section 1, we have all the green there for agreed upon language. For Section 1A, extra student supervision, we did eliminate a lot of the language we initially proposed, but we did keep in some language, and that's that last sentence there about supervision, and equitable duty rotation piece when teachers are having to supervise students pretty much from the beginning of their contract to the end of the contract time. This has come up multiple times in surveys and conversations, and I think the biggest piece here is through our survey data for elementary, this is more of an elementary problem. That we know elementary educators on average, through our survey data, are losing an extra planning period compared to secondary level. So we're just trying to figure out any way possible, either if it's through planning period language or supervision language, where can we give time back to those elementary folks who are seem to be losing more planning compared to the secondary level? And I know. I feel like I'm not that old, but I'm getting old. When I was a student at Eustis Elementary, my teachers would release me, right? When the bell rang, I was released from my elementary classroom and I would go to the car rider or I would go to the bus. There wasn't like a holding station or anybody like watching us after the bell rang. And I know during COVID especially, things seem to have shifted a little bit. But if we can look at some way to give teachers a little bit of time back every day, either in the mornings or after school, just to give them again some more time back, that's the intent of this little bit here.
Okay.
Especially, again, it's those elementary teachers, because they see the contract. And so like in the afternoon, the buses aren't here, so they've got kids in their classroom till their contract done at 3:30 and sometimes after that.
Okay.
The next one's 1B. So this was the piece that I was mentioning at the very end of Article 10.
Gotcha.
Just adding that word or phrase, I guess, including communication trees. This really came about because we know that there were some issues where there were some safety concerns, instructional staff had safety concerns. It kind of escalated more than it needed to be, and so we're thinking, in many cases, it's a communication piece, right? So if we can make sure that folks are involved in the communication about what's going on their campus and they know what to expect when an emergency happens. Teachers just want to have some say and input and know what's going on, right? So that's what that language is.
Okay.
C is just the agreed upon language. And then D. So think D, again, we had a lot more language here initially. We removed that. We did add a piece in the title to say, really, this is a typo, it should be planning period equity. And the reason that that was brought up in committee is because we have two sections that are basically labeled just planning period. And so it can be kind of confusing, like, why are they both labeled planning period? So that's why we wanted to try to put some clarification there that it's planning period equity. And then added the intervention piece there. And again, through our survey data, you can see the intervention piece is still an ongoing conversation. And so if that could be something that's discussed with the joint leadership committee, where some of that intervention conversation can take place, because like we were saying, whether it's done at the district level through teacher advisory or more local site-based, but to have some conversation about how do we make this intervention period effective and do it with fidelity and make sure that folks have some say into what that looks like. And then we also added the E back. There was, I think, a lot more again in E. We had some pre-planning language there. It was more extensive. We cut that and we just added the joint leadership committee would have a role in helping to plan site-based professional development and pre-planning schedule. We know that, some administrators are doing that maybe in their department meetings or team meetings. But really, I think all educators want to have some say and input in their professional development. And so it just seems like an appropriate place to have those conversations and make sure they get buy-in from all the folks that are receiving that PD. And then the pre-planning schedule piece. So again, if any folks have some concerns about the pre-planning, that would be the place to address it and work through those concerns.
Okay.
Section 2 just has the agreed upon language. Section 3, planning period. So again, that's why we wanted to clarify the planning period on the previous page, because it's labeled exactly the same. There's the agreed upon green language there. And then we did add, so again, this was area we initially proposed massive changes, right? We've rolled a lot of that back. But we do have some language changes in B. So we're changing it to an additional instead of a second. And then used for any purpose other than self-directed. So the intent is still basically there.
Yeah.
And then the last, the sentence below C. We kind of changed the order, so teachers are expected to attend an IEP. And then, MTSS and 504 meetings there. Yeah, we're trying to like have some clarification and try to make sure that folks understand this language because it is kind of confusing.
So help me understand a little bit on the justification of eliminating the expectation to attend parent conferences.
So I think some of my committee members are welcome to chime in here. I think the intent of that was because we already had language about parent conferences in another section. And that parent conferences seem to be often done, at least at the elementary level, during those 3 duty nights, like after the evening nights. So it wouldn't necessarily need to be done during the planning period. I don't know if I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think that was the intent.
Okay.
I think also the intent was like, I use MTSS about what are some more legal deadline oriented ones. Not that you're not expected to attend parent conferences, but not necessarily we give up a planning period uncompensated for attending it routinely.
Okay.
Like, I don't know how often that actually happens, like at high school, it doesn't really happen during our planning periods, it's usually after school.
Yeah, and I can read one here that actually says, creating and planning all outside contract times, we have forms to fill out just to write an infraction. We have to communicate to the parents if something goes on. The grade level was talking about, so then parent meetings, when admin expects all 3 teachers involved, takes up so much time. Because the 3 different people, you know, you're sitting there doing at the different times. Kind of like what we talked about before with IUP meetings, when only one person really needs to be there, and you can be there for 10-15 minutes, you would do your part and then go back and then. So like maybe there would be a common, if they could do it within together, not quite maybe taking the whole conference time. And that's what they're saying here. It takes way too much time to do all these. And then I lost my whole plan time because I'm sitting with everybody and talking about these things. I mean, if you can do a parent conference night with 15 minutes with a parent, you should be able to do a parent conference within 15-20 minutes during your plan period. Also, it seems like.
Most
And maybe
time,
that's-
if you've got all hands on deck at a parent teacher conference, you're addressing probably some significant issues, right? We've all sat through those,
Yes.
and they're interesting, from time to time. But I also get, you know, I've been the teacher that has put in the time and built the relationship and is not having the same significant issues, and I lose a planning period listening to the folks who have not put in that much time and effort. So I get where it can be an issue. So. Okay.
I think the next one is section 4. School schedules. So, in that second paragraph, again, that's that intervention piece. So we, again, I think had significant changes here. We rolled all of that back. We tried to add something, because again, we're trying to come up with how can we try to address the needs of the bargaining unit that was expressed in our survey data in some way. And so the conversation through the committee was schools may have times for intervention. And then the last sentence, no single instructor will have more than 15 students at one time during the intervention block. And that language came from the survey data, which said, what's the one thing that we could change about intervention to make it more effective? And the highest response was reducing the number of students or increasing the number of staff doing the intervention. So it would have less students in the session. And we did try to do some research on this, like what number of students is best for interventions? And often the research would say like 3 to 6 students, right? What we're putting here is much higher than that, like what the research that we found said, because we're trying to also be reasonable within the parameters of our schools. We know there are a lot of kids, right?
So that's my question. Where do the rest of those kids go? Because I can tell you, that's what you're truly gonna hear is that that once it fills up in some of the crucial, because the kids that, in some schools, they schedule themselves, right? And they know where they need to go, or you have people that are really proactive in scheduling them. And then you've got these large herds after
Yes.
that. So the math doesn't really work here.
So in the research that we did, we also.
I understand what you're saying. Smaller groups,
Yes,
better,
right. Well, I.
but
there
there's
was
still a
more.
bunch of other kids left over. So I don't,
So I'll tell you how other places have addressed this.
okay, cool.
So in the research that we did, we were finding exemplar schools that are doing the intervention block and what that looks like
Uh-huh.
within the PLC process. And in that information, basically they were saying that all staff that interacts with students were a part of the intervention
Okay.
process. So that means paraprofessionals, that means any non-load bearing folks, your instructional coaches, your deans, your administrators, they were all playing a role in the intervention block. And that way they were able to get the smaller group size. And again, I think this goes back to doing it with fidelity, right? We don't want to just do it to say that we're doing intervention block and then it not be what it's intended to be. If it's truly to help remediate students on the standards that they need, then we've got to figure out a way to have a small group so that we can do that. And again, we're not asking for groups of 3 to 6, right? We're saying like maybe 15. I don't know what the number exactly would be, but I can tell you, at least in my classroom, and Patrick can attest to this too, I would have 30 plus kids in there and it was 25 minutes. I was running around like a crazy person because every kid had a different need and trying to address all the things that the kids need at one time. And again, it probably wasn't run the way it should have been run. So those are issues that I think we need to continue to talk about. Look at.
I think once you extend beyond the class size, I think we need to look, maybe that's the place to start, right? When you've extended beyond your normal average core class size. Because at the end of the day, once you start, your majority of paraprofessionals on campus are gonna be in self-contained settings and they're hooked to kids that they can't necessarily leave for those types of things. And then I can tell you that there's I guess a herding aspect that probably occurs with administrators, whenever for the kids who might get lost on the way to intervention, right? And they have to go seek them out and find them and make sure they get to where they're going. So I think there's probably a decent amount of involvement with a lot of staff. Now, granted, I guarantee you there's a few teachers on every campus that it doesn't really touch them as much because I'm not sure they bring the same level of efficiency to improving student outcomes, right? But we know there's a place to work on it. I get the sentiment of it. It's gonna be a difficult to get all intervention spaces to 15 students. I don't even see how that's possible. So, but I get what you're saying and I get what the research lends to. So this would be something that I know it's heavy on. We've talked about in the other sections, right?
I think just having those conversations, we can talk about it.
Yep.
Some of those exemplar places that we saw too had very different working conditions too.
Yeah.
Like they had extended hours.
Yeah.
More staff and.
That's what I
so
was
it's like,
thinking.
How do we make this work with the current system?
Yeah. Okay.
And then, well, it's just 5, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
We just agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did I miss anything? Somewhere.
I know this was a lot of work and I just want to express my appreciation for the quality work that was put in on a short turnaround. So thank you very much. I can tell there was a lot of thought that went into the counter proposal. So thank you. I appreciate it. The exciting progress. So do you guys have anything else from
I think the only thing on the agenda was.
Okay.
Yeah, Lincoln Park, maybe the MOU
Yeah.
stuff, which you didn't,
I
you
don't
didn't
think
put,
we're-
yeah, you didn't put that.
We're not ready for it. I took that back off, just to give you guys a kind of a brief update of where we're at from Lincoln Park. Right now it's just 6 basic units have been allocated, to Lincoln Park. But like I said, as that enrollment continues to grow, but I mean, if we've got one teacher teaching on the campus, it's important. So So we'll check that out and see. I know you've got some other instructional employees. There'll be a full certified counselor there. There's a split position that's half instructional coach, half potential specialist, just kind of divides the duties, right? And as we see the enrollment grow, I'm sure some of those will come whole, as we go. You've only got one principal there, and then there's some split positions that are helping with the support. And then we've got a couple basic TAs that are attached there. So that's it's a very small staffed facility at the moment, but we fully expect that to grow.
And have they decided on a true time frame yet?
Yep, I've got that pulled. This is the part I wanted to double check and I couldn't get them.
The
Yep.
day one, not the night one, I think, if I'm correct.
Well, they have enrollment has grown, right? So that's why I've reached out to get more info so we can solidify this as we've gotten a little closer. So right now it's a Friday is a teacher work day for all instructional employees. So all of them would come in on the same Friday hours, and that I think those reflect the morning shift. So as it stands, what they're putting forward is a Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 2:48. And then, I'm sorry, so it's going to be a little bit shorter on Fridays. And then, on Fridays, it's 7 a.m. to 1:38. And when you do the math on all that, it winds up the typical 37 and a half hours. And then afternoon shifts, we 11:12 a.m. to 7 p.m. Same Friday hours. And that's still 37 and a half hours. So, the intent is that, they have, of course, the duty-free lunch and different things like that. So what I'm doing is going through what they're giving me, and making sure that, what parts are typical in the contract to their day, which most of it is, but what parts are not. So I'll get some more clarification on planning. That's what I want to add into it. Because they've got that big chunk of non-student contact time on Fridays. But at the same time, it's almost like, having some office hours to where students can come in and meet with their instructors and figure out constructively what they need to be working on or doing. So, this will continue to develop, and I'll, definitely by the next time we come together, it'll be ready.
Will this be more like an MOU then?
I think MOU makes more sense, most definitely.
Because that-
Yep. Cause I think we're gonna see it evolve. And that way, if we do need to run back to the table pretty quick, even throughout the course of the year, even from semester to semester, if they see some things grow or change, we can adapt. I think the school's gonna need that ability to adapt. From everything I've seen and from the teachers who have been interested thus far in working there, sounds like a pretty cool deal for a teacher, to be honest with you. It's very unconventional, but it's also, it's kind of neat. But, it's going to take a certain type of person that can work well with those students, because it's not necessarily supposed to be an at-risk school, right? It's supposed to be an unconventional, approach to kids. I mean, everybody, when we went to COVID, we had kids that disappeared and never came back. And a lot of them went and got jobs and decided school's not for me. And it's like, okay, what can we do with these kids that do want to work and do want to do some things and exercise that 18 credit option. So it's weird, right? Because it's not the same as our night schools that we're running. There's some similarities there also. So I'm gonna be interested to see how all that evolves together and what happens. So what I would like to do, because the last point on my on our agenda is setting some times. I I think the first time I'm gonna have full board and enough time to do proper research on all the compensation you guys have brought forward is gonna be on the 29th. We're gonna butt it up to our tentative budget hearing, and have an executive session then. So
Before
I,
you do- Could I just ask clarification?
yeah,
So you said Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 2:40 p.m.,
2:48,
2:48, sorry.
Yeah.
And then Friday, 7 a.m. to 1:38.
yes,
Okay, so for the evening or afternoon, you said 11, 12 a.m. to 7 a.m.,
7 PM.
PM.
7 p.m., I'm sorry. And then Friday, would Friday be the same hours or are you gonna have an hour?
Friday is 7 to 1:38.
No, she was
For the
talking about
afternoon.
the afternoon one.
Oh, Friday is the same. They'll come mornings on Friday either way.
The students aren't.
Yeah,
scheduled.
And I think what that does, it gives you a chance to have all faculty and staff together, right? And right now, it's not that many, so they're probably gonna be, and there's some overlap too, as you see. So we'll go back, we're gonna make sure we got, make sure contractually hours are fine. Because the first few versions of this, I'm like, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. And they've managed to get closer and closer to what makes sense. So and what I was getting at, I know that's kind of a decent amount of time between now and the executive session. I'd like just to have a listening meeting, not necessarily a subcommittee or anything like that. Just come in, have Dr. Byfield and Mr. Williams and even any staff maybe they brought on. We just come in and sit down together and see. So I'm under the gun on my other part of my new life is to help get the facility actually done. So I'm interested in this project in more ways than one at this point. So that's what I have. And we want to look at some dates coming out of that executive session.
So you're looking for the week of the 29th?
Yeah, I mean, coming out of that executive session, the problem, we've got launch in the lake.
Yeah.
That 30th, through the 1st.
So really, I think for us, the best day would be the 1st of August, that.
That's gonna be the only one probably. Because
Okay.
of the, because we're busy both days for lunch, like with the.
Okay.
The contract session.
Okay. Let's put a pin in August 1st and we'll verify that with folks tomorrow and make sure that works for everybody. I don't think that will be an issue. But let me make sure that we can do that. I'd like to do mornings or afternoons work better for y'all.
What do y'all think?
Okay. Can we do,
I mean, I like mornings.
okay,
Either way, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
okay. Can we do it at 10 a.m.? Okay, all right. I would say we can, 'cause I think we're gonna be, I'm hoping we'll be a little closer, right? But I think marathon sessions probably aren't gonna help us at that point. I mean, let's play a 10 to 1 and then hopefully we have the flexibility to jump right back in next week to get some things closer to finalize.
What would be at LCA?
Is this,
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
you just let us know, because we can, I mean, if you need the document stuff. or whatever.
Yeah, that's why if we have any. Yeah, I've got, yeah, looks like I've got some possibilities for that.
Do we want to set a possible date for the following week just in case? Because I know that started pre-planning.
Oh, yeah, that's
gonna
gonna
be
be, but at that point, my crew has they put in the work for me, right? And they're not gonna be answering my phone anymore. Unless they need some maintenance or, facilities work, then y'all be calling me. So, yeah, we can do something next week or the following week, rather.
What would you want to do then? And go back to the Wednesday?
Well, we have an insurance committee out.
We haven't,
Oh, that's
yeah.
right, I just don't-
Do y'all have that 7th kind of open?
Right now, yes, except for the 1 p.m. insurance.
Okay, I mean, we could bargain that morning.
The only thing is our folks will be in pre-planning,
Okay,
so afternoons better.
so afternoon's better. Okay. I mean, I can't see the insurance committee meeting going more than really an hour. So,
Ideally, maybe that's a signing thing, so maybe it's really after the insurance meeting.
okay,
3.
If we did 3.
yeah, that's fine. That works.
And then that makes sense, because then it's over here anyway.
The 7th at 3 here at the district office.
And I mean, and if we're wrapping up on the 7th, that'd be great. And it really doesn't take us off much schedule from, I mean, I know it takes a couple weeks for y'all to get things advertised out and so, all right, cool. Does anybody have anything else? Good? Okay.
So the other MOUs you would
Mhm.
possibly have then on,
And I was gonna ask, are y'all okay if I forward drafts of some MOUs? I mean, I know like there's some other stuff we'll have to talk about more extensively, right? Like cricket shortage and some other things, but if it's something I'll have to go back through, but I know we have a couple that are pretty standard that don't, yeah, there's,
mentoring, we may have to talk more about.
yeah, we need conversation on that anyway. So,
Those come off right off hand anyway.
yeah, if we'll agenda those for the next bargaining session, but if there is something lingering, I think there's one little one that it doesn't usually take much discussion that at least y'all can preview and see. So we'll have all MOUs on slate for that next session.
And then we never did hear about does Scott know about the ESSER?
He's working on that. I know he had communication even with the state today on ESSER, and a lot of it was wrapped up in facilities projects. When I talked to him, he said all ESSER dollars at the moment are committed. And it's a matter of whether some of those projects, if those projects are slated to come to fruition. So he said, I don't have anything to offer for it at the moment, but as soon as we do, we'll bring it back. Quite honestly, I think it's probably going to be something to where we might do some impact bargaining to where once he gets settled and feels comfortable about it, even if we're ratified or TA, we can come back and talk if there's X amount of dollars available to work with. That, I think out of the gate, you were able to get a lot of approval with some of those initial ESSER dollars. And now the state, which I know it's federal dollars, but the state is, I think they're a little more interested in the approval process than they used to be now that's coming out on the wire, right? But so I don't have anything to bring forward with that.
Anything, Scotty? I can't do it.
Okay.
To do. Elementary stuff.
We can
is
always
what comes
communicate.
in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and that's some of those meetings in between, just like a Lincoln Park informational meeting. I think some of that mentoring meeting, that's probably important for us just to meet on it all together anyway. And then if there's topics of bargaining that come up within those, we can make sure we slate it. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out, all parties involved. I know it's summertime, and I just appreciate you sacrificing the time and effort, and especially the quick turnarounds and great work. So thank you so much. All right, it's 3:12 on 7/11/2024, and this concludes today's bargaining session.